don't mean to minimize the reverence that the institutional church has demonstrated for these saints, both those formally acknowledged and those who are not. But what I'd like to do today is to walk us through some of the official church's understanding of what it means to be a woman, and say why this understanding is preventing the voices of women from having the impact that they could in the church, and why this means women's gifts go unopened. And ultimately, I want to suggest a new approach to theological anthropology, that is, how we understand the theological dimension of being human, and develop some dimensions of how such a new approach might open up the church to more creative possibilities. Now, some years ago, the former Commonweal editor, Sidney Callahan, wrote about how the Pope declared at a meeting she attended that he was a feminist. He spoke of his advocacy for women and of the importance that women hold for the church. And I will not dispute the Holy Father's good intentions. But a closer analysis of his understanding of women reveals that this understanding has a couple of characteristics that, at least for me, and for many feminist Christian women, are problematic and serve to limit the possibilities of women's gifts being welcomed and opened by the institutional church. Now, one of the main points that has emerged from the feminism of the late 20th century is the realization that biology and gender are not identical. Sex and gender are distinct. And the debate is a complex one, as many of you, I'm sure, know, but suffice it to say, in the words of Simone de Beauvoir, the author of The Second Sex, that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman. That is to say, we learn how to be feminine and masculine. I remember my mother suggesting to me when I was an adolescent that I might try to engage boys by talking about football. See, my father actually worked for Sports Illustrated magazine, so I knew everything there was that one could know. Others, thankfully not my parents, suggested that I should try to tone down my intelligence and even play hard to get, or worse, dumb, in order to get along with the boys. And I found these ideas really puzzling, because on the one hand, at my all-girls high school, we were encouraged to speak up in class, to do well in our schoolwork, and to think of ourselves as future leaders. Thank you, Religious of the Sacred Heart. Yet, on the other hand, it was suggested that we put these lessons into the background when we met boys. This I did not hear from the nuns. I was just never a good flirt. But as the women's movement matured, as I did, I found in it a welcome message that I could simply be who I wanted to be and not conform to some image of femininity that I could not wear comfortably. And the point I'm trying to make, which I think is well accepted, at least in theory, if not in practice, is that women and men are equal. We may be different, but we're equal before the law, and even more importantly, before God. Now, the institutional church wouldn't dispute this at all. But the key issue would be, how do we account for difference? And in official church teaching, which has been developed and intensified by the present Pope, the difference between the sexes is described as an ontological difference, that is, the difference of being. And even more, it is symbolic of the relationship between Christ and the church, and ultimately between God and humanity. This relationship is symbolized by marriage. God is the bridegroom, and the world is the bride. Christ is the bridegroom, and the church is the bride. Men are the bridegrooms, and women are the brides. Now, what does it mean to be a bride, theologically speaking? Well, to find out what the official teaching of the church is, we can do no better than to look at the encyclicals of John Paul II. And in his 1988 Mulieris Dignitatem, on the dignity of women, the Pope presents an extended meditation on womanhood and on humanity itself. Both are grounded in Mary, the mother of Jesus. This meditation, in turn, is based on a spiritual reading of the Genesis story. He begins with what is sometimes called the proto-evangelium, the pre-gospel of Genesis 3:15. I will put enmity between you and the woman. And he then links this with St. Paul's statement in Galatians 4:4, when the time had fully come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman. In putting these two passages together, John Paul is showing that woman, Mary, is central to human salvation. But it is not just female human beings that he has in mind. He says, and I quote again, he says, from this point of view, the woman is the representative and the archetype of the whole human race. She represents the